I think we really need to stop, you know, really religionizing this whole politics, you know. When you start saying that, you know, one of the, like now when you start saying that Rigathi Gachagua is a praying man with a praying wife, with a family. I mean, what are you trying to say? Are you trying to say that Azimio people and Martha Karua does not pray? You know, these are some of the things that at the end of the day drive division and anger amongst people when people ought to be healing, you know, because at the end of the day, remember some of the divisionary statements that came out of the campaigns, especially the ones that would touch on people's religious beliefs, whether people pray or not, who they pray to or not. Some of those issues were very sensitive, that moving forward would divide a nation, especially along religious lines or not. You know, like when you look at it, we must be sensitive, especially around this time. We must be people who read the room and understand what people are feeling and some of the emotions that they're putting out there, especially on matters religion. Let us just put that aside and focus on politics, because at the end of the day, we'll begin to judge these people and we will realize that, to be honest, God has no space in this, and it is about whether you are working or not, whether you are going to church or not is none of our issues moving forward. Now, going to the president promising that he's going to end, you know, the abuse of state power. Right. You know, one thing that I find very interesting when a new regime comes in is the promise of heaven and earth. You know, just the promise of heaven, that I will deliver heaven. And then when you know, when push comes to shove, they deliver very little. Remember, we've had presidents before. We have witnessed Kibaki taking power. We have witnessed Uhuru Kenyatta taking power, plus William Ruto. And we have seen what they have been able to deliver in the past. When we talk about abuse of state power, I find it very funny that they would make it such a big agenda, when in the past regime, they themselves, at certain instances, were seen as to be participating in that abuse of state power. They had state power. Remember that before William Ruto decided to exit, or was exited from government, whichever happened first, or whichever was the true case, that he has had instances where he has been, you know, implicated in certain, you know, issues that are quite not very positive, you know. So he must be honest with himself. What are we talking about when we say state power? We hope that he will end it, but he must also be honest with himself that as he's saying, I'm going to end state power, can he admit to what extent he himself has involved himself in abusing of state power or entertained the abuse of state power? I'll give an example. In the last, in the 2017 campaigns leading up to now the 2017 elections, he entertained the use of cabinet secretaries in their own Jubilee campaigns. Why should why should things change now that he's vying for presidency in 2022? And if they are to change, then let them completely change. Let us not have that culture. Let the culture be over and done with. But before we get to the point of saying that I will, you know, end state abuse of state power, also admit to what extent you yourself have participated in the ending of state power. On the question of handshake, I mean, every regime comes in with different plans and ideas of how they want to run their government. Every regime comes in with, every president comes in with their own way of doing things. If he doesn't want a handshake, we cannot force him into one, you know. And remember that the handshake that we had in 2018 was precipitated by certain circumstances. It wasn't just people waking up and saying that, you know what, we are now going to shake hands. Remember how 2018 was. If today was 2018, I would guarantee you that right now what would be happening, and it is the truth because this is what happened. There were a lot of cases of you would hear police brutality across the country, you know. There was a lot of violation of human rights when people would, you know, basically come out and agitate for what they thought were their democratic rights. They were visited upon with a lot of violence. We had cases of Baby Pendo dying. We had cases of so many cases that were documented that looked like would lead to a situation where, had there not been a handshake, the country would not be where it has been for the last 4 years. So we must appreciate, in as much as we are ruling out the handshake, we must appreciate the role it has played the past 4 years. There are people who are not happy with it. There are people who are happy with it. And for those, I mean, for those of us who have seen the benefits of the handshake, we must point out and say that, look, courtesy of the handshake, there was a peaceful transition of the Uhuru Kenyatta government. Maybe William Ruto looked at it and said, look, I'm not willing to be part of this government of coalition. And maybe that is just not his style of politics. And we respect him for that. But we must also appreciate and look back at where we are coming from as a country and the benefits of this so much demonized handshake. I mean, for instance, I will give you a very good example. Had it not been for the handshake, we would not have experienced probably 70% of the development that the Luo Nyanza region has experienced in the past 4 years. We would not have seen I mean, for instance, maybe the first 1 or 2 years, we would not have seen the peaceful, execution of duties by the president that took place because the two of them shook hands. Don't forget that they were not shaking hands because there are two people coming together shaking hands. They were shaking hands because there were two people who have millions and millions of supporters who at that point were either disappointed or excited, and out of their disappointment or excitement, they were willing to act in support of their leaders.
But would it be fair, Ruth, to say that,
yes,
you know, understanding where the president-elect is coming from, that immediately after the handshake, he was the second in command, but he was kicked to the curb?
You know, we must look at what truly happened. Is it a case of somebody who the handshake took place and he decided that, you know what, I do not want to be part of this, and as a result, took actions that would communicate, according to Kenyans, that he was kicked out, but in reality, he himself just said, you know what, I don't want to be part of this.
Okay,
and you know, the thing about politics is what the politicians do versus what they communicate to have been doing sometimes are two totally different things. That I can walk out of a government, but then create the perception or communicate that I have been kicked out of government. Remember, some of us have vied for elective seats, and we have spun around certain narratives that have worked for us or against us. So we know when something when something looks like it is a narrative, or when it is the truth.